Good morning. My name is Dennis Falloon, and I'm the District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator, and I'd like to welcome you to the 6th District 7 Safety Academy webinar. Today will be, the topic is Safety Funding Categories, Requirements, and Conditions. It will be presented by Dave Skalunas, PE, District 7 Safety Programs Manager. Now I'm going to go in and give you a little introduction that will kind of give you an overview of the Safety Academy, and then we'll let Dave move forward with his presentation. What is the District 7 Safety Academy? In a nutshell, it's to provide information regarding safety-related issues to enhance your local safety programs in your particular area. It began on October 23rd. The seminars run between 10 and 12 o'clock, 2-hour window, and they are held on Wednesdays. This first cycle of topics, safety topics, which are 12, will end on Wednesday, January 29th, and then the new ones will begin sometime in February, and you'll be getting a notice in the near future about those new topics. The topics will run no less than an hour and no more than 2 hours. And it also depends on the topic in that particular webinar, whether it's longer or shorter. You can register. You've seen enough emails about it that you can go to this site, SurveyMonkey, and register for any of the webinars you have not registered for. You can also go through district7safetysummit.org to register. There's a link there. And as Anthony had mentioned, you can go to completed sessions at this link here, www.tampabaytrafficsafety.com/LATSA. And that allows you to get the PDF format and also the recorded version you can listen to. The workshop series, like I said today, is Safety Funding Categories, Requirements, and Conditions. And please note there are only 3 topics being presented this month to accommodate the holiday schedules for folks. And today's one of the days, and then you have December 11th and December 18th, and the next one will not be until January 8th. And here is my brief contact information if you have any questions or if you want to get a hold of me. With that, I want to turn it over to Dave Skalunas. And Dave, thank you.
Let me get off mute there. Thank you, Dennis. Can everybody hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I'd like to get started. You see some of my contact information up there. I'm Dave Skalunas. Work here at District 7. I'm the Safety Programs Manager. Today we're going to be talking about the categories for the safety and requirements and conditions for safety funding. So if I can get on here with the slides and some of your previous sessions there. We've got the little calendar, and hopefully everybody signed up for lots of those, and we're getting lots of information out to all our local agencies as well as other DOT folks and Federal Highway of what we're trying to do down here. Contrary to popular belief, we don't have just a big giant suitcase or box full of money that we can just hand out to everybody. We actually have go through our federal safety funds are allocated by Federal Highway and overseen by the Federal Highway Administration. And we have to adhere to the strict guidelines of the federal guidelines and obey the requirements. The website there at the bottom, you get the Safety FHWA DOT Gov. You can read about the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Here in Florida, our federal safety dollars, they're basically Stewart is the Florida Department of Transportation as we work with Federal Highway and look for good safety projects to adhere the Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan and distribute some of those federal dollars out to different people. All of our safety projects, we must fulfill the goals of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan and follow all the guidelines to use that funding accordingly. One of the key factors when using these federal safety funds is the fact that we want to use a data-driven process. We want to be able to back everything up with data. We want to have reasons and being able to justify why we're doing everything, and so we can basically have the justification and show the need. We do this through quantifiable crash or fatality reductions based on crash history of certain locations. Establish the benefit-cost ratio, which in this case for our Highway Safety Improvement Program, we're looking for a benefit-cost ratio greater than 2. We're also been doing the net present value, so we've been pulling that benefit-cost ratio and putting everything in net present value. When setting up this program, we looked at the three of the main areas: vulnerable users, which include the bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycles. We looked at lane departure crashes for your typical run-off-the-road type crashes, and we looked at reducing fatalities and injuries in intersection crashes. Now, when we're talking about some of the different safety projects for our Highway Safety Improvement Program and our benefit to our different local agencies and what we're trying to do here, we have the different physical projects, which we can actually use some of this funding for helping with the design, helping with the construction of the project. We do not use any of the HSIP funds to purchase any right-of-way for the project. So if your project has need for right-of-way, we need to make sure we take care of that up front, and we got to be careful that we follow the proper procedures. If you know that the right-of-way is needed for a particular project and then you're going to use federal dollars, that right-of-way has to be acquired following the guidelines to make sure your project goes on without a hitch. Some of our different types of technical projects that we can do with through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, we're looking at doing some signal retiming. So we've been doing a lot of projects with timing of corridors. Crashes. We've also been doing, through some different areas, our study support, which we can do some feasibility and constructability reviews on certain projects, make sure that they're viable projects. The safety project identification, making sure, finding the hot areas, finding what can be done. We also do the crash analysis of different corridors and intersections. We've also been using the federal funds for doing material purchase requests. Some of the different things we've used them for are the speed feedback signs, which show a good benefit to getting speeds down, which everyone knows that higher speeds tend to make more severe crashes. So I want to get that. The bright sticks, which are the reflective signpost coverings, which we've used a lot of these in curve warning signs on chevron signs, a lot of school zones through the Safe Routes to School program, or just purchasing signage. Maybe it would be taking a curve warning sign and going up from maybe a 30-inch sign up to a 48-inch sign to just delineate that curve better. Anything we can do to reduce serious injury and fatal crashes is the purpose of this program. I want to get into the application review process a little bit. Our project approval process, and this would be our safety team. This consists of some DOT folks as well as some of our private consultants, where we actually take and look at the different projects that have come in, verify that there's the safety project is eligible, make sure it's actually being used as a safety concern and it's not just an operational type project. An operational type project can improve safety somewhat, but we have to again go back to that data driven. We have to show that there's a safety need. That's the way this program was set up, that we actually have to be able to document that. Confirm the candidate of the safety projects. That's what the group will do before it goes on to the next level of review. And that's when we get into the funding approval process, and this will be by the district staff when we actually determine how we would want to try to deliver the project. There's a couple different ways we can do that. We can either go through our LAP process, which LAP is the local agency program, and that would be where the local agencies could actually design the project, get reimbursed for that design, construct and let the project and get reimbursed for that as well. Sometimes using the LAP project, we have gone through some different methods, and we can do some of the design here using some of our consultants, and then have the actual local agencies still going through the LAP process, let and deliver that project that way. We've also been able to do through our design build push button project. We'll get into that a little bit later. Those projects, being that it's through the design build push button project, those projects have to be very clean with not many, I'll call them hiccups right now, things that can slow a project down because the timeline on that process is very tight. Then we'll actually render the final decision once we decide which method of delivery we're going to use for the project, and go from there. Here's kind of an overview, this little flow chart of the project review process, and we'll go through them one stage at a time here in just a minute. But that's kind of the overall, and let me go to the next slide. We'll start at the left and move left to right. First thing that when a project comes in, is the project a good candidate for funding? And you need to find out first if it's a viable safety project. You know, does the concept make sense? Will it improve safety? Is there a demonstrated safety need? Got to make sure that it's an actual safety project, and it's not just maybe an operational project, or we're trying to do you know, maybe a roadway hasn't been resurfaced in a long time, and it's experiencing some you know, higher level of crashes. While that could in itself be a little bit of a safety need, we got to be really careful in using safety dollars for doing any type of a maintenance type of activity. So if it doesn't make sense or improve safety, then that goes initially to the no, and that program or project is passed on. If it hits the yes, if it passes this first stage, then we go to the next one here. Now, does it meet the HSIP requirements? Does it have an acceptable fatality or crash reduction? Because that's the whole purpose of this particular program, is for your fatal and serious injury crash reduction. While there could be some safety projects that are, I guess, more of a proactive safety project, while they're still good safety projects, we might not be able to use this program for it because of how this was set up. This was set up to reduce fatalities and serious injury type crashes. We'll get into that a little bit later, because it doesn't necessarily mean the project is dead. It just means we got to go a different route. Need to double check and make sure the benefit cost is there, or the net present value, or both, and make sure we're going to meet that, and it would be a good project. Now, this is again one of those things. We put it in the orange because it's a case by case. No recommendation, resubmitting for HSP. Other funding support options may be available. That's when I was talking about if you had a project that it didn't have a lot of fatality or serious injury crash reduction, but it could be still a good safety project, because maybe it's an area where you're looking to prevent any type of crashes in the future. Maybe you know you got something coming on, so you don't have a history yet. Those have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. The funding under this program won't necessarily be used for that, but we can work with your local offices, and our local safety office will work with you, and we can see if we can't still have that be a viable project for you. But again, that's a case-by-case basis. If it meets all the requirements, then we hit the yes, and we go on to the next block. Now we're going to actually look at that project a little more in detail. Is it feasible, constructible? I mean, do you know if right-of-way is needed? And some of the projects, some of the comments have come up that you know, just because right-of-way is needed on a project, that doesn't necessarily kill it. While we can't use the HSIP funding for purchasing the right-of-way at this time, or we don't really want to in this process, doesn't necessarily mean that the project is dead. It just means that it may need to be moved out a little bit further until right-of-way is checked on, and then if it is actually needed to be purchased, it can be purchased under the proper procedure, and then the project can go forward maybe at a later year. Is the project constructible? We'll actually look at the different projects and go out there and just make sure it can be constructed, that we're not going to run into any pitfalls. For instance, maybe drainage could be a big issue out in a certain area if we're looking at putting a turn lane in, or shoulders, or maybe there's head walls, or some different things that we've run into. Just got to make sure we have that all taken care of and looked up front, make sure it's a good project, and that we can go as smooth as possible. So again, in the no block here, if it's not approved at this time, the project may be resubmitted in a future cycle. Certain conditions are met and issues are resolved. Again, a lot of times that could have to do with right-of-way, if there is a need for purchasing right-of-way for the project. The next one is it ready? Is the project ready? Has right-of-way been acquired, if it was needed in there, or has any needed public involvement occurred? These couple of things can really slow a project down, obviously, and when you're on a tight timeline of getting funds encumbered, we need to be able to do that. Our LAP schedules, once those guys get committed to doing a project, we have to deliver that project. We get graded on that. So if the city or county or whoever is doing the LAP project, if they end up not meeting the schedules, then we in turn end up not meeting our schedule, and that doesn't look good for anybody. So we got to make sure we hit those timelines and get the projects constructed on time. Again, if it hits a no and we're not approved at this time, project may be resubmitted when those conditions are met. Again, right-of-way or public involvement, if those things haven't occurred, when we can get those, maybe we just push the project out. If it's a good project and it meets all the other requirements, we can do it at a little bit later time. If it is yes at this point, then we would consider it approved as a candidate project. Now, it still doesn't have funding at this time. That'll be in the next box when we get there. Now we're going to take those candidate projects. These are the ones that passed the first stages. We're going to look and check on those projects and see if they've been in a prioritization, either by the cities or counties, if it's high on their priority list, what kind of benefit costs and the funding availability for those. The project could have some local commitment to it, and while not required, it does look good to have, if the locals have money vested in a project as well, it shows that they're serious about getting it done, and hopefully we can add a little money to the pot and get a bigger project done and make some good safety difference. We also discussed what delivery method, being either going through the design build push button contract, going through the LAP method, or is it maybe material request, or even at times if a project as a whole can't be maybe constructed because it doesn't hit all the requirements, or maybe at that time right-of-way is needed, we can even take a look at that project. Like, let's say it was maybe going to be adding, for example, paved shoulders onto a curvy section of rural road. Maybe, for instance, the road bed really needs to be resurfaced before we can add the paved shoulders into maybe that resurfacing project or something like that. So we can't get out there and do that right away. Maybe there's some interim steps that we can do, like upgrade some of the signage, upgrade some of the curve warning signs, or the bright sticks. Anything we can do in the interim to that, we'll be willing to work with you with. Again, here's some of the different delivery methods. Like I said, we have our design build push button. Now, these projects that will go into the possible candidates for design build push button, I said these had to be clean projects. When I say clean, we're looking for things where there's not going to be a lot of possible utility relocations, things that can delay a project, right-of-way acquisition, just basically things that could slow a project down. One of the things, we had a project where maybe railroad was involved near one of the projects. It doesn't necessarily kill the project. That project is still going forward. We're not going to do that one through design build push button, but those projects, when you start hitting things that can slow the project down, we just got to make sure we allow enough time in the schedule or push them out a little bit to make sure everything's accommodated so we get that delivery on time. So that's a huge thing here at the department. Projects that do need a little bit more time, we can go through the LAP process, local agency program. That way we can establish that schedule, account for any right-of-way acquisition or any of those types of things that need to be ironed out as the project moves forward. Again, delivery methods I talked about. We don't have it up here on the slide, but the materials requests, we can work with you to actually provide some of the different type safety materials I mentioned before, like the bright sticks or speed feedback signs, curve warning signs, things like that to try to keep people on the roads and increase safety. Some of the questions that come up, obviously, when we're looking at different projects, why was my project denied? Not a clean project, and again, I use that word, needs more vetting. I mean, we need to work out any utility constraints, right-of-way needs, unclear, not constructible. So some projects that come back like that, it doesn't necessarily always mean that the project's totally denied. Sometimes we just may need more information. It needs to be vetted a little more thoroughly. Some projects, like I mentioned before, right-of-way keeps coming up, need right-of-way acquisition plan. Like I mentioned, HSIP funds were not going to be used for right-of-way purchasing. So if a project does, in fact, need the right-of-way, need to make sure, and I mentioned this a couple times already, that the correct procedures for purchasing that right-of-way, since federal funds will be used to construct the project, if you know this ahead of time, that you're looking at using federal funds, the right-of-way has to be purchased in the proper procedure. You've got to follow the right guidelines, or it can possibly hamper getting the other funds for the project. Some of the projects where we've been looking at doing some of the paved shoulders with the safety edge, pavement condition has been an issue. Ideally, if we have roads that have better pavement, we can add the paved shoulder and get that safety advantage out there. If money to add the safety funds for the paved shoulder to an upcoming resurfacing project, let the local funds pay for the resurfacing project because we don't want to use the HSIP funds for the maintenance portion of it. Add the paved shoulder with the safety edge and then maybe the audible vibratory markings onto that roadway. That would work out good. Or if your roadway has recently been repaved, we can go back in there and possibly add the paved shoulders, audible pavement markings to a project like that. So pavement condition has been a little bit of an issue on some of the projects and caused them to get in the denied category. The next one's in yellow, the low or no crash fatality reduction. And I mentioned a little bit ago, those projects, some of those projects may still be good safety projects. It may be a safety project, for instance, we may have a location where you've got maybe not the required number of pedestrian crossings in a given time frame according to the traffic engineering manual, but you may have a concentration of those, let's say for instance in the morning, but maybe it's really low during the day. These are the types of projects that we're going to need to work with you on, and actually the TEM is being adjusted. 3.8 in TEM is being adjusted. That has to do with the pedestrian crossings. We're looking at the revision, so we're actually waiting on that a little bit, so we can work with you on some of those different crossing areas. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that those projects are dead projects. It just means that we can't necessarily use this program for that, and we can work with you and trying to accommodate the safety and more like along the lines of a preventative type of safety measure. The next one here was doesn't meet the FDOT's traffic engineering manual. We've had a couple of these where they look like they could have been benefited by adding things such as our rectangular rapid flashing beacon, but maybe the crossings did not meet the manual. Maybe didn't have enough crossings. I mentioned something about we had a location or something came up where there was heavy crossing movements in the AM, but then the rest of the day it was pretty stagnant, so it didn't didn't meet the traffic engineering manual, but yet there was still a need for it in the morning. So those are the types of things we need to work with our state safety office and find out how we're going to address things, because these are kind of the questions that are up. Why can't we use the safety funds for these kind of things? And we're learning a little bit here, and it's a full process, and this is only our third year doing that, and so we're working with everybody, and we're trying to make everything as consistent as possible. Now, in the red one here at the bottom is not a viable safety project. Maybe the project that came in was more of an operations type project. While yes, sometimes increasing the operation of an intersection or some location will increase safety because you'll reduce some congestion, things like that. It still might not meet the safety project as a whole, just because of the fact that we're not reducing the serious injury, fatal crashes. Maybe it's a poor safety concept. It was just who knows on that one sometimes. Anyway, so those are some of the areas. Left it pretty good amount of time for this one for questions. I ran through this pretty quick. I was hoping they would have a lot of questions on this one, because this one has to do with a lot of the projects that are out there. So hopefully we got some questions out there, Anthony.
In the chat, there are presently no questions, but give everyone a couple minutes here to digest all the information they received and hopefully write a couple in there.
Do we have the Jeopardy theme music?
I could hum it for you, perhaps.
Just had a kind of a question posed in the room, then I see a couple popping up in the chat there too. Some of the projects, when we're talking about for future consideration, if it was maybe didn't meet all the requirements or needed some things, how could we work with them? We're here in the safety office, and like I said, we're available. We have some consultant help. Maybe it would be have one of our DOT consultants give a hand a little bit and actually research what could be done. Sometimes there's an area where there's a safety need, but maybe it's not readily apparent of what needs to be done. So we've even offered some help as far as to look at those areas and try to find out, okay, look, hey, we can go here and maybe do this and help you come up with a safety project that would qualify under our HSIP guidelines. So like I said, anything is game. I mean, we can talk about it and figure out what needs to be done and try to come up with ways to improve the safety.
We're starting to get a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you see them or not. Read them through. Question about if you can give some examples of some of the case-by-case scenario funding. What are case-by-case?
Well, okay, so some of those, I mean, just kind of briefly talked about that a little bit. Like for instance, if we had a project come in where somebody wanted to put rectangular rapid flashing beacons, for instance, or improve a crosswalk, or put crosswalks in, but maybe there was not, maybe we didn't have a lot of crossing movements, at that location, or that would meet the requirements in the traffic engineering manual. Those type of things, we need to look at them and find out and make sure that it is going to be a reduction in potential future crashes. Maybe you had a major generator come in, so you don't have a history at that location yet. But we don't want to wait until you have crashes. I mean, if you're going to potentially have a crash problem because you're going to get this big generator coming in and you're going to have shift work or something like that. So that's why I'm saying by case, because just because you don't have the crash information at that time doesn't mean it's totally out of the question. I mean, there's exceptions to everything, and we need to look at those on an individual basis. I hope that helped a little bit there, Rob.
There's a question about how does a local agency go about requesting technical assistance to help them identify future safety projects?
Pick up that thing on the desk that has the two little things. The one end you talk in, the one end you listen to, and give us a call. Or no, it's kind of a smarty remark, but no, we can't necessarily guarantee that we can put somebody over there in your office, but we can generally use some of our manpower over here to look at some things. We can look at some crashes and and try to give a hand that way as best we can. We don't have unlimited resources. Like I said, we don't have that big giant suitcase here full of cash. But I think I did see Felix on the line. I think he's got one in his office that he opens up frequently and lets us have a little add to it. But he does require us to document everything and make sure we're doing things according to a data-driven process.
So there is no official form to fill out for help with manpower. It's just an email to you.
Yeah, through email, and we can chat about it and try to find out where your major concern is and stuff like that.
There's a question about signal rebuilds. Would reconstruction of signal support system be permissible in order to receive backplates, for example, if it has good BC?
We have done some signal rebuilds. Again, that's we got to look at those individually. I mean, if you've got a signal that was recently replaced, you got a span wire there, so most likely not span wire to mast arm. We've had a couple where the signal was relatively new. We really don't want to go in there necessarily and rebuild a signal for backplates if the signal's in good condition and relatively new. If the signal's getting to its lifespan and we can do hit a good BC by rebuilding the signal, adding backplates, adding head per lane, coming up to all the requirements and bringing everything up to standards, we can do that at times. We don't want to get into totally rebuilding every signal just because. I mean, we have to document it. It has to be data driven, and it has to show a need.
I think this is a good time to interject also a conversation about, without necessarily going into specific numbers, but the limitations of requested funding amounts versus awarded funding amounts, Dave, and as how do you prioritize which projects get selected? Because just because a project has a good BC and it's a decent project and it goes through the flow chart of getting down to the end and saying it's a good project, not necessarily be awarded because of funding constraints. Like you said, it's not an unlimited pool of money. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we definitely have constraints as far as the amount of funding. Like I said, we don't have just a big bucket. We've got to look at things. We've got to try to maximize the bang for the buck. Basically, I mean, yeah, you can have a great BC, but if your project's $6 million project, well, that's we don't have the unlimited funding to do something like that. Doesn't necessarily mean that project is dead. I mean, we can talk to if it's a really good project and we're going to reduce fatals and serious injury crashes, I'll give Joe a call. I think I saw Joe on there, and in turn we can get on the phone then with Joe Santos and Felix at Federal Highway, and who knows, maybe that project would be a good project, and we will go about it, just on a different level. That's why I said we kind of got to do a little bit of case by case basis, but we also do have a certain amount of funding each year, and we got to try to maximize that. Do as many projects. We are trying to spread the wealth around a little bit, not trying to give it to all one county. We do have to kind of look at everybody. So we're trying to be as fair and equitable as possible, as well as reducing the main goal, the crashes and the fatalities.
Yeah, that goes back to the data-driven approach. But expensive. So, I mean, although it may be a good project, through this process, it will be competing against other projects that perhaps have a better net present value or a higher BC. So it will be challenging for the project through this funding, but it can be pushed through other funding mechanisms.
And that's one of the reasons, too. I mean, we're not only, it just doesn't matter only on BC. We're looking at net present value. We're looking at, you know, the total number of fatal and serious injury crashes reduced by completing the project. So there's a lot of things that weigh into that, and then available funding, and when we can get it in what year, and even what funding mechanism that we have, you know, to get it out there. I mean, because sometimes, I mean, hey, we might be able to do that project because we happen to have availability in our design build push button, you know, that we can put some project in that way. So maybe that one gets funded over something else just because it fits into how we can get it delivered faster. So there's a lot of little variables in it. It's not like a set formula that if you hit this number you get it. You know, we do talk about them a lot. We get a good group together and we comb over these things. It's not a fast process by any means, but we try to, like I said, be fair, equitable, and get the best bang for our buck and reduce the most serious injury and fatal crashes.
A question about LAP. Besides schedule, what are some of the other things that the district has graded for the LAP project?
Can you repeat that again, Anthony? What was that?
It says, can you provide a list of items that the district is graded on LAP project, for example, schedule? What else the district graded on?
Well, fortunately, sitting in the room here, Larry Taylor, the DOT ex-LAP guy, would like to chime in on that, and he can he'll give you a hand with that one.
Yes, the schedule is very important because the you know, LAP projects now count as part of the district production schedule. And that's where the grading comes in, because the district is graded on its ability to produce the projects shown in the work program. The projects shown in the work program basically constitute a commitment to the public, and that public commitment must be met to the maximum extent feasible. So if you've got a project, we're going to look at the schedule before it's ever programmed. We're going to coordinate the project with the local agency to make sure that, you know, once the project is determined to be feasible and eligible, we're going to look at that schedule. We're going to coordinate with the local agency, and we're going to make sure that the project is producible and that it meshes well with the period of time when we may have funding available. The key element there is coordination. That schedule, as David mentioned earlier, if right-of-way is required, then and right-of-way cannot be funded with HSIP dollars. But from a timing perspective, we have to ensure that once the local agency acquires the right-of-way, that the project is producible, constructable during the year that we are providing the construction funding. So that means we spend lots of time on the telephone, lots of email, serving in my capacity here. I basically serve as the guy that calls up the local agencies and bug the daylights out of them constantly, asking for information. If they're a little late on the delivery of some element of the schedule, then I'm bugging them. Where is it? Where is it? When can we expect it? But that's basically what it comes down to, the ability to produce it, also the ability of the local agency to abide by the federal requirements. And as I like to say, we went to LAP jail back in 2005 because the local agencies were not meeting all of the federal requirements, and we weren't watching them. And that's changed. It's a new day in LAP. Our job is to be the steward of the federal dollar, and we're going to monitor. We are going to conduct QA reviews. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that the money is being spent in the intended way. And on time, that's right. And that's the truth.
There's a couple of questions, and some have been answered in the chat already regarding resurfacing project. There was a surface project that could be justified if skid numbers are low and there's 5% rear end crashes. I think that kind of goes back to the answer to that question in part is the same answer as can a signal rebuild be justified to put backplates up. It's about the data driven, it's about the net present value, It's about the reduction of fatal and severe injury crashes. So it may have a favorable BC, it may have a favorable net present value, but it's going to be competing, because resurfacing is expensive. It's going to be competing against other projects that will have favorable BC, more favorable. What do you consider in providing a project involving audible vibratory? What do you consider in approving projects for audible vibratory? What are the do's and don'ts there?
Basically, a lot of the when we've been looking at the audible vibratory marking type projects, pavement condition has been one of the key factors. Because when we're trying to put down the markings, if the pavement is in the existing pavement's in poor condition, like let's say we're going with just putting markings down and not even looking at adding the paved shoulder, you can't put the new markings down on pavement that's cracking, alligatoring, all that kind of stuff. If it's in poor condition, the markings will not adhere properly, or they'll come up. So we're looking for decent condition pavement to put it down. Like I said before, ideally, if there's a project that's in the city or county's resurfacing program, we can possibly add funds into that project or follow along behind or something like that to add the safety benefit to that project. I mean, in some cases, actually construction-wise, if let's say you're adding a paved shoulder with audible pavement markings on top of that, yeah, you could saw cut, add the paved shoulder. You do a little bit of an overlap where you feather, or you don't have a straight joint, you have a staggered joint. However, now you've got this beautiful shoulder on the road, and you've got a road bed that needs resurfacing, and we got to be really careful, just because the public will see that and wonder why the heck you didn't get out there and resurface the entire road. You came in and put this nice shoulder that nobody drives on. While it would increase some of the safety, you still got to look at the road overall as a whole, and those are the kind of things we got to weigh out, and hopefully we can take care of the road bed and do it all at one time. That's the best way to do it. So
the only thing I would add to that, Dave, is the roadway type. Also, audible vibratory markings typically are not installed on residential roads.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So if you have driveways and mailboxes up and down the road, audible vibratory markings, not a great idea. Those were the two things that derailed most of the projects in this last cycle review: poor pavement marking and residential.
Correct.
Does this scenario qualify for safety funding if a severe geometric rural semi-urban road with a sharp horizontal curvature, deep ditches, no shoulders, and
you kind of cut out there a little bit, Anthony. I can't see that in the chat pod, that particular question you're reading.
Okay, I'll repeat it. It's a severe geometric constraint on a rural semi-urban roadway with sharp horizontal curvature, with deep ditches, shoulder, and holes. Would that qualify for funding?
The only thing I could think of with that one is the fact that that's going to sound like a very, very big dollar project. So that one, while yes, it could possibly qualify for the safety funding and meet the criteria of the program, without knowing the specific location, I mean, just the sounds of it sounds like that's going to be pretty costly. Again, like I said before, that may need to be. We could look at that and see what kind of reductions we're talking about there for the dollar value to see if it, and the crash history. Obviously, you got to take and find out what kind of improvement we're actually going to make by doing that project. See what the benefit cost is, see what the net present value is, and see where that falls as far as prioritization.
In the data-driven approach again, it would face some stiff competition.
Yes.
That have better net present value, so it may qualify. typically 3R projects are not eligible, but if there is a documented wet weather skid problem, it's a skid resistant overlay eligible.
Yeah, I think this was kind of answered. I think Peter actually sent an answer out on that one, just a couple below it. Basically, it's kind of, again, going to be a case-by-case, scenario. While we don't like to, do resurfacing as far as, just a resurfacing project with safety funds, certain situations, I mean, we have done projects in the past where there was a documented need, wet weather need, for having a skid friction, overlay, type of application put onto a certain area. Again, case-by-case scenario. I think Peter, right on the next one there, contact me. So my contact information's up there. If you got a location like this, we'll again, we got to look at them individually because we just got to make sure we're using the funds correctly.
The phone number is 6254.
You know what? I actually got a correction on my phone number. I got a little dyslexic on the slide. It says 6245 right now. It's actually 6254. That will get to somebody else here in the safety office, the 45, but just not my desk. So it is 6254. Sorry about that.
That's a great way of getting the phone calls to somebody else, Dave.
Exactly. I tried, but somebody busted me.
DOT guidelines are needing to be met for all these projects, Dave. Even though they are on local roadways, there's a question about public involvement. What are the key activities that the district is looking for public involvement?
As far as DOT guidelines on off-system roads, we'll actually follow the Green Book for off-system roads. So, there's stuff that the plans, if we're going through LAP, will still have to come to the department for review. It'll go through the review process, but the reviewers are all instructed that they're following Green Book standards. So it's not, quite the full DOT standards there. Now, as far as public involvement, basically, I mean, it just has to. The main thing that we're looking for is that some public involvement has taken place, and that it's a a favorable project. I mean, that you're not going to get railroaded out there when you go to start, silt fences go up or something, you start constructing, and all of a sudden people are laying down in front of the bulldozers. We don't want that to happen, because obviously that's going to delay the process and could get you on a report when there's been no activity for a while, a federal report, and we don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
and if I might also add,
hang on.
This is Larry
Go ahead,
Taylor.
Larry.
That has pretty much happened on a couple of occasions. There was one Safe Routes to School project, well, two Safe Routes to School projects. One where courtesy, in an area where courtesy busing was extended to an area because they did not have adequate sidewalks. And Safe Routes to School project was proposed, and somehow somebody came up with the idea that once the sidewalks were built, the county was going to eliminate the courtesy busing, and the public went into an uproar. And that issue was eventually resolved, and there was another instance where some of the folks apparently were not aware of a project coming through, and it was for a multi-use bike trail. And when the construction was about to start, they came out of the woodwork, very vocal against the project. The politicians got involved in it. It was heading toward an election year, and the politicians seized the opportunity to, and they basically killed the project. Now, when that happens, that can have a negative effect on our production schedule. If that project is programmed and it's in our production schedule as a lab project, and it goes belly up like that due to public sentiment, it's still a black mark against us because we failed to meet the commitment to the public, even though the public came out against it. So it's public involvement. You don't have to conduct a public meeting, but it is good that you can show evidence of some type of public involvement.
I mean, this goes back again to wrap up thoughts on this. question is all about doing due diligence early on in the process to identify things that may potentially derail the project, whether it be identifying right-of-way issues, identifying utility conflicts, getting public buy-in. All these things are very important along the way. The point is so that the projects are not derailed later on, as Larry said, because it's part of the production schedule once the funds are allocated. What we don't want is to have a project have funds allocated to it and then be derailed later on. There's a couple of excellent comments here. Rudy brought up the point back to the audible vibratory markings question, that just because a project is not accepted as it was requested for audible vibratory markings, when we evaluated the projects, there was a handful of them that had an actual run-off-the-road crash pattern. And what was requested at those projects was audible vibratory markings. But upon review of the crashes, they were not run-off-the-road crashes along the entire segment. It turned out that the crashes were really concentrated at one or two curves along a roadway. So a project for audible vibratory markings may be denied for that particular countermeasure, and instead what is being recommended for that project as a follow-up with the denial letter is to enhance the signage at the curves, because that's really what the problem may be. So we do evaluate these projects very carefully to make sure that what is being requested addresses the actual problem that is occurring out there, to address the actual crash data. So even though a project is denied, something else is done. Because any project that is submitted through this has crashes, has a beast. We just need to make sure that we're applying the correct countermeasures to those projects. So that's the next.
Correct. Yep.
Also, Felix brought up, I mean, with the whole data-driven net present value, benefit cost, another key aspect of this, besides identifying projects that reduce fatal and severe injury crashes, it is also locations, projects that meet one of the strategic highway emphasis areas. Projects must be categorized into one of them in order to be applicable for funds. So it's not just severe crashes, it's one of the areas. Would the pooling of water in tire track ruts that accommodate that contribute to hydroplaning disallow a friction overlay because the rutting is considered a maintenance?
Again, on that one, I think that's going to have to be done on a case by case. You know, we're going to have to review the crash history on there, and a lot of times on something like that, if you got a road, I mean, if we're talking, let's say, off system here, like we're doing, you know, this whole project thing, whatever public entity is involved in that. I mean, if you've got some rutting out there that's holding water and that's becoming an issue, I mean, that's going to be something that we're going to have to work, you know, with the local agencies and that, and we have to find some funding sources, because obviously there's a problem there, and we need to work to get, you know, a problem like that fixed. And there has been some cases there where things have been elevated, and the road may not have been in the capital improvement program or the resurfacing program, and it has been elevated because of something, you know, of that nature, where there's been some crashes, and it's gotten a little heated, and they've had to be found some dollars, you know, from some pool somewhere, you know, and needs to be addressed.
That gets us down to the chat window here, to the bottom of it. Peter listed some of the strategic highway safety plan emphases. They are intersection, vulnerable road user, lane departure, also aggressive driving, distracted driving, impaired driving, and at-risk drivers, which includes
Yeah, I think you cut off on the at-risk drivers there, Anthony. You cut off a little bit. So you
at-risk drivers includes routine and aging road use.
Right, there you go, okay.
Are there any other questions? This was a fantastic Q&A, by the way. By far the best one. Any of the
And again, to repeat on that contact information there, phone number 975-655. It's
All right, well, if there are no other questions in the chat, we conclude this recording now. Thank you, everyone, for